Iron Maiden, The X Factor. 11 tracks for 71 minutes. The 10th studio album from the UK heavy metal band, released October 1995 via EMI and CMC. Produced by Steve Harris and Nigel Green, recorded at Barnyard Studios in Essex. 2 singles were released, Man on the Edge and Lord of the Flies, taking the album to number 8 in the UK, number 147 in the US, and still charting pretty well across Europe, though its only certification was silver in the UK. This is the first of 2 albums with vocalist Blaze Bayley and was influenced heavily by the divorce Steve Harris was going through at the time. This album didn't go as well either critically or commercially as previous releases. Dave.
The X Factor, that album. I do like this. The songs are good. It's much darker for Iron Maiden. Steve Harris was going through a divorce, as Andrew said, and I believe his father died around this time, so he's in a very dark place. But this was the 90s, and that type of darkness was perfect content for an album. But not what you want from an Iron Maiden album. Despite all the evil imagery of the band, they've always been fun and upbeat, but not with this album. Darker themes, slower and more complex songwriting, and a hell of a lot more progressive elements, which they would continue to explore from this point on. Great content on here for these songs. It's just Blaze Bayley isn't Bruce Dickinson. The songs shine the most when they're performed live by Dickinson and when he returns to the band a few years later. Credit to Bayley, though, it's not an easy task stepping up to the man who was one of the most iconic frontmen of metal of all time. But his voice just doesn't cut it at times. When it works, it suits the mood of this album, and when it doesn't, it makes you cringe. In addition to the darker style of the X Factor, another thing that might have hurt this album is how many songs are based on movies. Maiden have done that a few times, 1 or 2 songs on the album, but at least half of its content is from a movie, either Falling Down, Lord of the Flies, Apocalypse Now, Taxi Driver. It's just too much. Yep. And with everything that was going on in Steve Harris's life at the moment, he could have drawn upon some real-life experiences. I remember enjoying this a lot more when I was a depressed 16-year-old. All these years later, it's still a guilty pleasure. If you have a very rigid cookie-cutter idea of what Maiden needs to be, you won't enjoy this. But if you like bands experimenting a bit, it's worth a listen. Overall, I do give it 7 out of 10. Sign of the Cross, Lord of the Flies, Man on the Edge, Blood on the World's Hands, and Fortune of War were my standouts.
Me?
Yeah. No, go.
All right. I'm going to say it. I don't like Blaze Bayley.
Well, this is going to go well.
Yeah. No, it was nice. No, yeah. Look, I tend to talk a lot of shit about Blaze Bayley and that era of Iron Maiden. I'm just not a fan of him fronting the band, to be honest. I haven't heard this in over 20 years, so when I listened to it preparing for tonight, I was shocked. And what I was shocked about was that after Fear of the Dark, okay, Bruce has left, they've got Blaze in, the band couldn't come up with a better set of songs to actually showcase their new singer. That's what shocked me the most about this.
That's a really good way to put it, actually.
I really think they missed the trick here, Andrew, though. That's the whole thing. So, in a nutshell, it's correct. I'm not blaming... For years, I've blamed Blaze for how much I hate this album. So, sorry, Blaze. I'm actually blaming Steve Harris and the band. Because Blaze, when you're listening to it, he seems to give it all he can. Okay, now, he's not Bruce. He'll never be Bruce, anything like that. But these set of songs, when Bruce was in the band was writing songs to suit Bruce's strengths. Now, what I think's happened on this album is that they're still writing songs in that same vein. If Bruce was singing on them, yeah, well, okay, they'll be darker, a lot darker. If Bruce was singing on it, it could have been passable, but these songs are not made for Blaze's voice. And like I say, as a new guy coming in, tailor it a bit, kind of get the, he was up against it as it was, tailor it a little bit for his voice, and they didn't. I think they just kept, like you were saying before, the cookie-cutter approach, and just they thought they had Bruce still there. I just don't think he really fits well off the band at all.
Well, they did it after Deanna. They changed the way they wrote to suit what they had in. There goes the Iron Maiden. See, even the flag doesn't like it.
Even Eddie hates Blaze, and it's understandable. It's okay.
It's a sign.
So the riffs on this album, they're generally well constructed. The songwriting itself is okay. It's competent. But again, overall, the vocal delivery just does not suit it. And the other thing, the main difference is the songs here. Maiden's often had longer songs on the album. This thing, it's a hard listen. Every song on this is over 5 minutes, which just really burdens the listener. I couldn't really make it through the album. I know now why I didn't listen to it for 20-something years, to be honest. I'm not going to go into individual tracks because, quite honestly, almost every track here is the same song. Quiet intro, heavy verse, quiet break, heavy chorus, quiet solo, another quiet verse, chorus, rinse and repeat 11 times. That is the album. Look, at a stretch, if I had to pick up standouts, I'd probably choose The Man on the Edge, Fortunes of War, and The Aftermath. But seriously, if you listen to those 3 songs, it's like listening to the whole album, because the rest of the songs are just like cut and copy paste versions of those 3 songs, really. I wouldn't recommend it to most other fans. Like I say, the obvious flaw here is that it's a band that's come back with a really subpar set of songs and a vocalist that's completely unsuited to it. It's not the vocalist's fault, no. For all these years I've been a bit harsh on Blaze. This actually lies on Steve Harris. Look, I just couldn't get into this. Standout tracks, Man on the Edge, The Fortunes of War, The Aftermath. It's Maiden. I couldn't give him a fail, so I had to give him a 5 out of 10. So,
Well,
Follow that up.
I also hadn't listened to this album in 20 years.
Good move.
When this came out, I think I gave it 1 or 2 spins and went, nah, and threw it away. So to come back and listen to it over the last week was a really interesting experience. It didn't suck as much as I thought it would.
Yeah.
I think it actually holds up okay.
It's softened in hindsight. I think everyone was
Yeah.
expecting something at the time, and then they got this, and so it made it harder. But now that you go back to it, it's softened the blow.
Everything he's saying is right. It doesn't suit Blaze's voice, and it's a big reason why he ended up leaving the band. If you believe, everything that ended up getting leaked out is that they were forcing Blaze to try and do things that
He couldn't
do.
Yeah.
They were trying to make him sing Bruce's songs with Saw here and there. And you sort of get a similar vibe listening to these new songs. Obviously, Steve Harris has written them, so this is what we want you to do, and he couldn't quite capture the magic. But they're not bad songs, and it's not too bad to listen to. It sounds okay.
Yeah.
Certainly a hell of a lot better than the one that came after it.
yeah.
As far as capturing the sound's concerned, I think they've done a pretty reasonable job. And I'm losing my technology again. See what you've done to me? Never mind, I'll go for yours. Look, like I said, I didn't hate it. If you're new to Maiden, don't start here.
Yeah.
It's not a good place to be.
Well,
but,
if you do, it tends to get better from this point on, though.
Yeah, true. If you want to start at the bottom, well, there's
Not
the
quite.
one after this,
Yeah.
and then come back.
Actually, if you're new to music and metal, don't start here.
Yeah.
It's just leave it.
But
Don't do it.
it is okay. It's not rubbish. It's certainly worth a listen. I also gave it 7 out of 10.
Wow.
The highlights were, you had them all here,
Wow.
except Man on the Edge, Lord of the Flies, and what was the other one you said? Aftermath.
Aftermath.
Yes, that was my 3.
Wow.
Thank
Okay. Now, I've never given a great deal of time to the Blaze Bayley albums. And he's got a different inflection to the way he goes about doing things. He's actually pretty good as a singer and not a terrible fit for what they're doing overall with this album. He's not as blistering or powerful, but his voice fits the somber mood of the album whilst not being so different as to be completely alienating. So when you go from Bruce Dickinson to Blaze Bayley, everyone talks about this massive shift in sound. It's actually not that massive a shift. The trouble is, what's been covered off is that they didn't meet where they were supposed to meet. The songs versus the vocals sort of went like that when they could have just changed things up a bit to suit better. I think the biggest switch stylistically came when Bruce entered after Paul Di'Anno's exit. That was a bigger shift. Quite dark album here, very weighted, heavier use of the string sections to give this an oppressive atmosphere, which is different for the band. Still quite energetic though, it is a longer listen. Blaze doesn't quite keep up, for a lack of a better term, but he's serviceable, and I think that's the bottom line of it. He just can't quite get there, and that's the problem with it. The mix on this I found to be too bottom heavy for me. I get what they're doing with the dark vibe, but the drums are too far back and it's too bass centric for me, which is Steve Harris's fault again. This album just needed more dynamics as far as I'm concerned.
The vocals are way back too.
Yeah.
It's almost like they were trying to kind of hide him.
But that's the thing too,
Yeah.
but they could have added more reverb, for example, to
Yeah.
soften it as well, and didn't do that. So they'd missed tricks all over the joint to make it a softer change, so to speak. If they really wanted to pursue doing songs with Bruce Dickinson style, a different singer, they missed a lot in the studio to help them get there.
But this was done in Steve Harris's studio, wasn't
Yeah.
it? And then when Bruce came back, they went...
They insisted on, fuck
Yeah.
that, we're getting out of here. Yeah. That was later on, obviously, with Brave New World. Musically, this is very much an Iron Maiden album, galloping rhythms, blistering guitars straight off against each other well. I think the riffs and solos are better on this than they were possibly on Fear of the Dark, or at least on par. I think the guitar work was up there for me. Unfortunately, tracks like Fortune of War do show Blaze's shortcomings. It's not the right track for him. Not a bad song, but the vocals don't sell it. You feel like it's being phoned in or it's in demo phase, but again, we've talked about it, it comes down also to the composition. They didn't do him any favours by saying, here, go and sing this.
Yeah.
It's not made for him. Another pitfall of the album is that the writing given to the song's plot as well. It's all well written, but it needed to be trimmed. That becomes especially important when you're trying to show us what Blaze can do as opposed to what he can't. They would have given him some more reverb, like I was saying, to sound bigger as well. Overall, it's well written for the most part. Some of it does feel like it's really stretched out instrumentals that try to make you feel something, but it doesn't quite come off. And when the energy is there, though, it's good, which only makes it a little more confusing, because we've all started going, it's not as bad as I remember it being.
Yeah.
Which is that whole thing about it. It's a confusing album to listen to. The lyrics are a little pretty good, but they're repetitive, which also hurts the album.
Big time.
Yeah, big time repetitive lyrics. And some moments are downright cringeworthy in that regard. I do like the approach taken with the synth on this one, though. They use that well on this record. And almost every time I think I found a standout track, it goes into some middle section that just drags it right the fuck down. It's depressing in that regard. I really feel this is coloured by Steve's personal life at this time, and it hasn't helped the album. They probably should have taken a break. Another band from the early years that really struggled with the mid-90s, the saving grace in a lot of ways on this record is the guitar work, as far as I'm concerned. As a consequence, this feels like a long listen. You may or may not skip. If they come up on shuffle of your whole library, you probably will let it play out. But sitting through this in one go, it's not engaging enough for that. No. There is some interesting experimentation going on with the sounds, though. That brings you back here and there. The start of Blood on the World's Hands is a good example. Some of this actually makes some good and interesting soundtrack material, in my opinion. All in all, not as bad as the reputation it has. However, not an overly strong release, given the dragging with some composition that's a little off-putting. This does drag in a big way. Yeah. The back half is particularly painful. The Unbeliever as a closing track can go in the bin. That's a shit closer.
First appearance.
Shit closer. Not the album, that song. I feel bad for Blaze, actually, on this. This is not a gig you'd easily turn down.
No.
But he's just come at the wrong time to join the wrong material. It's not his fault. 5 out of 10. Man on the Edge, Judgment of Heaven, because you can hear Brave New World Foundations in that song. Those are my standouts. Check it out for yourselves. Let us know what you think.